Well, to talk now about the current conditions in the Middle East, we welcome here in our studio Dorothy Parvaz. She is a global politics reporter with ThinkProgress. Kamal Alam is a visiting fellow at the Royal United Services Institute and joins us from London. From Tel Aviv, Shlomo Brom is a senior research associate at the Institute for National Security Studies. And also with us here in the studio, Ilhan Tanir is a journalist and political analyst. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Dorothy, let's start in the studio. As I just said, tensions are rising in this conflict in Syria. Is there a risk that what is now essentially a proxy war between Iran and Israel could escalate into a wider conflict?
Well, I think the real danger lies in the possibility of some sort of miscommunication or a mistake, really, at this border, because I can't see Iran launching a war against Israel, which is, the beneficiary of a massive amount of military aid from the U.S. and has nuclear weapons. Iranians have no appetite for war right now. But the danger is some sort of escalation at the border, some sort of thing that's a misfiring or a miscalculation.
Shlomo Brom, the Israelis, of course, have been carrying out these attacks in Syria. They see a threat from these forces in Syria. This is what the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said about the conflict in Syria. Let's watch this.
We are acting against Iran and against the Syrian forces who are tools of Iranian aggression. Whoever tries to hurt us, we will hurt them. Whoever threatens to destroy us will bear the full consequences.
So, Shlomo Brom, there we heard from Benjamin Netanyahu, very characteristic, tough talk from the Israeli leader there. But what is the Israeli strategy here? What is the long-term goal?
Well, Israel as well does not have an appetite for a full-blown conflict, direct conflict with Iran. But I think that Israel is trying to send a very clear message to Iran. And the message goes like that. We were not involved in the civil war in Syria. You were involved. You got what you wanted. The Assad regime is now stable and strong, and as was said earlier, controls most of Syria. So now it's time to leave Syria. But if you want to stay and to build an infrastructure with the aim of threatening Israel, we will operate. And that is the long-term goal of the Israeli operations, to prevent Iran from building a strategic infrastructure of ballistic missiles, remotely piloted aerial vehicles, air defense systems that will be aimed to threaten Israel.
Kamal Alam, what do you make of what Shlomo Brom just told us, that the Iranians could erect or construct infrastructure, military infrastructure in Syria, which could threaten the Israelis? I mean, there's something as well. The Israelis say that the Syrians are in a part, the Iranians rather, are in a part of Syria which they said they wouldn't deploy in, but yet they are there and they threaten the Israelis. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think Israelis have a legitimate point. They face threats from Lebanon, which have obviously been there for a couple of decades, and they cannot afford the Iranians to have a similar kind of threat from Syria. Having said that, I believe that the Russians are the ones that are rebuilding the Syrian army and the defense infrastructure. The Iranian or their proxies might be on the ground, but I think they have moved away from the south, and the Israelis themselves said that a few months ago, that the Iranians have moved away from the south. Of course, the Israelis would like the Iranians to leave Syria lock, stock and barrel. I don't see that happening anytime soon. Iran is there to stay. Having said that, I think the Russians are the prime lead when it comes to rebuilding the Syrian military and defense. And I think Iranians might have some other interests, but it's the Russians that are there to help the state of Syria.
Kamal, you say the Iranians are there to stay. What's in it for them? Why do they want to stay in Syria?
I think the war is not yet over. We thought this war was over a few months ago, but as we've seen, there are so many developments in the northeast and the northwest. And at the same time, I think they would like to have some sort of influence. I think Iran's influence is exaggerated at times in Syria. They are going to draw down in Syria. However, they're not going to leave completely. And at the same time, they're there at the invites of the legitimate government of Syria, so they don't see any reason to leave unless the Syrian government asks them to leave. I think that's the way they see it.
Ilhan, Tanir, of course, the Turks are involved in Syria as well. This is the Turkish president expressing his concerns about what is going on in Syria. Let's watch this.
What is critically important is to prevent a power vacuum after the pullout of the American troops. Our country's only goal is to clear the territory of Syria of terrorist groups, ISIL, PYD and YPG in the first place.
So if we have an escalating conflict between the Israelis and the Iranians, could that destabilize Syria to the point where it could pose a serious threat to Turkey?
I don't see that kind of a threat coming to Turkey from Israel and Iranian conflict in Syria.
Yeah, but what I mean is if the country is unstable, could that pose a threat to Turkey?
Definitely, but Turkey has been already stating that the Syrian Kurds are our main national threat. So it is not the Assad regime, it used to be before 2013 and 14. But surely if Iran and Israel conflict, which there is already a conflict within Syria, if this blows up, I think that will definitely reflect Turkey. But we also have this northeastern part, which is about 400 kilometers. Right. And there is no Syrian regime over there. There's very little presence there. Syrian Kurds are already taken over there since 2012, 2013. So the point, I think, that Turkey is already in this conflict, and whether Israel and Iran gets even bigger fight within Syria, Turkey is already there, and I think it's going to stay for foreseeable future there.
Dorothy, just a moment ago we heard that very tough talk from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that any country that threatens Israel will bear full consequences. But there's been equally tough talk coming from the Iranians. We just heard from a senior Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander who says that Iran's strategy is to wipe Israel off the political map, and it follows equally threatening remarks from an Iranian Air Force commander last week who said Iran is impatient and ready to fight against Israel and eliminate it from the earth.
Right. Well, I mean, this has been a long sort of narrative. So Iran has never really recognized the legitimacy of the Israeli government and the Israeli nation. So this is not surprising talk. And, when another government that's hostile to you kills your troops inside another country, troops that have been invited there by the leaders of that country, whether we like them or not, whether or not like the Assad regime, they have welcomed the Iranian troops there. Well, you have to say something in response. You have to talk tough, just like Netanyahu talked tough. But I think that Mr. Alam is correct when he points out that it's the Russians who are really driving a lot of the operations in Syria. And I cannot foresee the possibility of Iran going against its ally, which is Russia, in Syria. And Russia definitely does not want any kind of conflict between Iran and Israel in Syria or anywhere else. A stable Middle East is definitely in Russian interest. They have a lot of energy investments in the area, and they definitely don't really want to invest the military might to stabilize things. So stable Middle East is what Russia wants, and there's no way that I could see Russia allowing Iran to sort of go a little too far afield in this.
I want to talk about Russia's involvement in more detail in a moment, but let me first go to Shlomo Brom. Shlomo, those comments that were made by those Iranian commanders, how will they be seen in Israel?
Well, this is the usual rhetoric that we are used to get from Iran. And, well, we treat it seriously because we know that it reflects their ideology, the fact that they want to see the end of the state of Israel. But eventually, actions speak louder than rhetoric. And what is happening in Syria is a test of wills between Israel and Iran. So far, I think that Israel demonstrated that it has a stronger will and it is willing to act on this will than Iran. Because, as you said before, Iran is not interested in a wider conflict with Israel. So far, the Iranian responses were very limited.
Kamal Alam, if we look at the involvement of Iran in Syria. What kind of control do the Syrians have over the Iranian forces that are in the country? Is there any kind of coordination between these two forces?
I think there definitely is some kind of coordination, but when it comes to the military battles that have been fought over the last couple of years, I think it's the Russians and the Syrians that have done the bulk of the fighting. The Iranians, of course, had militias that were used in far-off areas, but when it comes to the command and control center, it's very much a Russian and Syrian decision. Of course, they coordinate with Iran because there are lots of different forces on the ground. But I don't think the Iranians are in the lead here. The Iranians would not overstay, neither would the Iranians do something that endangers Syria. There has been some friction, however, between Russia and Iran with regards to what the Syrians want. And as Syria moves towards stabilization, Syria's taken over a lot of territory over the last 2 years, mostly thanks to the Russians, not the Iranians. I think they do not want the Iranians to jeopardize that. And that also means to provoke Israel. It's not in Damascus's interest to provoke Israel, but at the same time, a more beefed up Syrian military, as we've seen, have been firing a few surface-to-air missiles. The S-300s are operational as well pretty soon. So I think that's where the line is drawn. Iran is there as an ally, but if it threatens Syrian interests, then the Russians will tell them to stop.
Ilhan, Tanir, could we get to a point where, a tipping point, where Turkey could get more involved in Syria? I mean, let's listen to some of the statements made by President Erdogan. Let's watch this.
Our patience has a limit. We will not wait forever the fulfillment of the promises given to us.
So President Erdogan has said that Turkey will go into northern Syria, where there are Kurdish groups operating. That also puts him at odds with the United States, doesn't it?
Yes, but also it puts him odds with Russians right now. He was in Moscow just a couple of days ago, and there is practically nothing came out of that summit would be a sign for green light for Turkish forces to go. I think at this point, both the Americans and Russians do not want Turks to go and invade another big part of the northeastern Syria, which has all the main Syrian Kurdish towns. I think is going to be a big task. Mr. Erdogan has been talking about this impending operation. Just 5 weeks ago, Mr. Erdogan said we'll be there in a couple of days. Last week, he said we'll be there in a few months. Today, he stated that we will be there soon. So there's a local elections in Turkey about 2 months' time. As far as we can see right now, neither Russians nor Americans want Turks to do another big operation there.
There is lots more to discuss, including the U.S. role in Syria. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.